Hello everyone and happy International Women's Day. I see all of you. If you would like, please open your cameras so we can see you. Thank you for joining us today. International Women's Day is a time to reflect on progress made by women, to call for change and to celebrate acts of leadership. We are here today in a special session called Women Leadership During Times of Crisis. We will talk with extraordinary leaders who would present their perspectives on standardization during COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the future of standardization. This webinar was initiated by IFAN, the International Federation of Standard Users, an independent, non-profit-making international organization based in Geneva. The webinar was organized and hosted virtually by the Standardization of Israel. Thank you everyone for making this happen. My name is Vered Oren, and I'm a board member of IFAN and Director of Communication and Foreign Affairs at the Standardization of Israel. I would like to introduce to you today's speakers. We have Anita Anderson. She is the CEO of Sweden Institute for Standards. She is a board member of SAN, as well as a board member of ISO and ISO Council. Our next speaker will be Athena Panayotou. She is the Director General of Cyprus Organization for Standardization. We have with us today Andrea Bedard-Smith. She is the Chair of the British Standards Society and IFAN Secretary. Dalia Yorom is the Director of Standardization Division at the Standardization of Israel. She is also a member of the board of ASTM. We also have with us Dr. Elizabeth Stamfel-Blaha. She's Managing Director of Austrian Standards International, and she's a former Vice President Technical Management of ISO. We also have with us Gabriela Ehrlich. She's the Director of Communication at IEC. And Jody Scholz. She is the Lead Administrator in South Africa Bureau of Standards. If you're ready, let's begin. The pandemic created a new normal by disrupting all our work and life practices and introducing new models of working, such as remote work, social distancing, virtual meeting, etc. In our standardization world, when we rely on exchange of information between professionals from around the world, the pandemic has caused a profound change. I would like to address the first question to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, how was this year different than the year before? How did the COVID pandemic impacted your work in Standards Austria? Please tell us about what changes you had to make this year in your work, and how did you cope with the new normal? Please refer to the change in your place of work, as well as the change in the process of standardization. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, first of all, I unfortunately have to tell you that the new normal has not arrived yet in Austria. We are just starting with the vaccination, so there is still quite a way to go until we come to the new normal. So what challenges did we face? Well, about a year ago, exactly on the 16th of March, we all our staff went to telework, to home office. And some of them had already experience in that, but the majority of them had to cope quickly with this new way of working, and it went very well. Fortunately, we were very well prepared in terms of connections, in terms of IT and so on. So this was a very important fact. And actually, our staff really appreciated that and recognized that we were very well set up. Well, and then over the last year, with a few interruptions, we all worked from home. And we appreciated that sometimes we were more efficient in digital meetings, that we all learned quickly, especially those who had never ever to do with such meetings, they learned very, very quickly to cope with that. I also feel that those digital meetings are less hierarchical. We are all just a little photo on the screen. So it seems there's really on the same level. We had to learn, of course, a broad variety of tools, but people appreciate the work from home. And if we come back to a new normal, I'm sure that those tools will continue to be. Well, let's talk now about standardization work.
Okay.
The same
Okay.
applied to that. We had to go
Okay,
digital.
תגביר לי רק אותה קצת.
And we had also positive experience. So we had sometimes more participants because they did not have to spend the time for traveling. So that's a very big advantage. And I heard from ISO meetings where a totally new rhythm has been developed. So instead of having the springtime meeting and the autumn meeting, we had continuously something like 2 hours meeting. So a lot of inspiration for the future.
Thank you very much. We will turn now to Athena. Athena, how was this year different for you in Cyprus Organization for Standardization?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here to listen to us. Well, like Elizabeth said, the first major difference was the remote working, that up to March 2020, we were not implementing any policies. So basically what we did, we had to immediately, as soon as the lockdown measures were announced, we had to implement our IT tools and try and find out how we were going to work. In terms of the everyday life relating to standardization, let's not forget that the lockdown and all these measures influence both our private and our professional lives. So that meant that people were at home working, but also taking care of young children. We are an organization where the majority of our staff is around 40 years old, so rather young, with a lot of young children in our family of standardization. So it was a question of being able for the first time to balance work and family, because if you're at home, it doesn't mean that it's easy to focus on what you have to do. The one thing that Elizabeth also mentioned, the web meetings, a year later, we feel like they're more web meetings than necessary for a lot of things, because now with the new normal of being able to meet with people all around the world whenever you want, we meet for a lot of unnecessary issues as well. So there is a lot of burden for having meetings all the time at any hours, because now it's easy for everyone to meet at any hours. Not being able to have any physical meetings, being in a smaller country where a lot of the interactions we had with society were by physically meeting with a lot of people, with organizations and all that, means that we had to readjust, and we had to wait for everyone else to be up to speed with the IT tools. So it was not easy on that. The new normal was not easy to begin with, but a year later we are pros now. So we are managing well.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. And Jody, can you tell us what happened this year in the South Africa Bureau of Standards?
I think similar to Athena and Elizabeth, experiences, we've had pretty similar experiences. For instance, on the standard side, we've had to move all our technical and our subcommittee meetings online. We've had to introduce productivity tools to make sure that we're driving performance. We've also had to reintroduce key performance indicators for our technical committees so that we're able to monitor and track progress, obviously through consultation. I think on a personal level, Athena has also indicated that many people are pillars of society, they're parents, daughters, sons. And so having to cope, I think, with all of the challenges that have suddenly been placed on individuals, understanding that there are some mental health challenges that people could be going through. People are dealing with so much loss on so many fronts. For instance, loss of income, loss of stability, loss of freedom of movement. And so what we've done is we've also had to extend our wellness services to family members of the current SABS employees, so that to demonstrate and show that we understand that it's not just about work and it's not just about performance. I think things like communication has ensured that we be inclusive in the decisions that we take, where we're going as an organization. And I think just having a presence and sometimes I've had to say to people, I actually don't know. I don't have those answers. But I think that level of honesty, that level of authenticity has certainly helped just ease some of the challenges that many people have faced. I think just also, I think learning new skills and becoming more digitally fluent has been something that we've all had to do. So that's been a challenge for us, particularly in some of our technical committee meetings. There have been some challenges around skills levels. There have been some challenges around connectivity. But I think balancing all of these certainly has been absolutely important, while still realizing that people have blurred the lines of working from home and from work. And so also just setting boundaries and showing that you're leading by example, I think have been some of the important lessons for us, certainly.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this. Very, very interesting. We go now to Sweden. Annika, could you please share with us, how did you cope with the situation this year?
Thank you. In Sweden, we have been working home for a year now. It's working very well, I would say. I think COVID has brought something positive as well as negative, of course. I think we have a lowered thresholds of participation, as Elizabeth talked about. We can see that in Sweden we have more participants, smaller companies. It's easier to take the time. It takes less time, and you don't need to travel. So that's a kind of lower threshold, and we can see it's more inclusive as well. But I think that standardization is about the relationship very much. It's a community, and right now we are actually eating off our relationship capital that we built over years. So I think a combination of meeting in physical and continue building a relationship is very important to keep our system going, as well as then in between having shorter meetings over this format would actually help us going faster as well. But I think it's also brought something positive. I don't think that we would have met in this way this day if it wasn't for COVID-19. So I think that's very positive. I think it's lowered thresholds also to meet, and it's actually brought the world together. We're only struggling with the time zones, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes, you're right. A year ago, we wouldn't have met this way virtually. Going to the second question now. According to a research done lately by the Harvard Business Review, women perform better than men in times of crisis. They are more effective. And according to another research published by the American Psychological Association, US states with women governors had fewer deaths than states with men governing. Dalia, I would like to address this question to you. Do you agree? And if so, what insights can you share with us on the way you are dealing with the new normal?
Thank you, Vered. Tough question because, I think that the researchers are quite different, because the first one is a more academic one and the second one is based on real answers. So if we compare the both researchers, we can come to the conclusion that they both deal about the way that women have a better efficient, and they are more efficient than men. And if the question is, do I think that women are more efficient, then I will answer that I don't know. I really don't know, because I know many women and many men that they are very efficient, and some of them not so. So I don't think it's a matter of gender. I think that it's really a matter of being efficient. And we had to be very, very efficient during the COVID times, especially last March, when we started how do you call it, the new normal of standardization. We had to change all our working habits, work from home. My colleagues described the situation very well, and I think that the situation is similar to Israel. So we had to work from home. It affects the relations in the families, because working from home is not, you're not working in a vacuum. You have your kids with you. You have to help them to learn virtually, so it affects them. We had those standardization committees virtually. Also, we had to be very efficient to establish a help desk in order to help all our members to connect those meetings. Not all of them were very familiar to those IT tools, and we had to help them. So yes, efficient, this is the word.
Yes. Thank you, Dalia. Thank you very much. And now, Andrea. When we spoke on the phone the other day, you mentioned New Zealand Prime Minister as a leader who provided strong leadership models during the COVID-19. Can you elaborate on that? And do you agree that women perform better than men in times of crisis?
Well, thank you very much, Berit. Yes, I did mention her, and I still think she's one of my best examples. It was interesting what Dalia was saying about efficiency, because that's not one of the traits that was covered in the research recently. It identified competencies for crisis to do with inspiration, listening to others, building relationships, and that kind of thing. And I think really Jacinda Ardern responded to the COVID-19 pandemic very quickly, very efficiently, and very caringly. And because of that, New Zealand is probably an exemplar of low numbers of deaths and low numbers of cases. She closed the borders very, very quickly to everybody, and then only opened them to New Zealanders who had to self-isolate if they entered the country. Of course, being an island is an advantage in doing that. However, I was looking at the figures yesterday, and they had 26 deaths in New Zealand, which is 0.53 of 100,000 population. Here in the UK, we weren't so successful at all. We've got something like 187.5 deaths per 100,000 of the population, which is very high in comparison. So I think that was a real achievement for her. But there's other things as well that she did that makes me think of her as being a good leader. Before pandemic showed up back in January, if anybody can remember January last year, at Davos, she introduced her government's plans and said that they wanted to prioritise the social. And she introduced her well-being budget. And I think this was very much, was very new. And I think it's a very good initiative to do that. And of course, the other thing that she did that I was very inspired by was when they had a terrorist attack in New Zealand. And her response differed because she would not mention the name of the terrorist ever, on the basis that the people who were involved, who suffered in the incident, were the important ones, and the terrorist name should never be mentioned. And I was very much in admiration of that. So, yeah, I think, as leaders go, she's one of my heroines. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Gabriella, what do you think? What's your opinion on that? Do you think that women management is any different than men's management? And if so, how?
Different, yes. I would say that it's a bold statement to say that one is better than the other. I would agree that it's not necessarily gender related. I think there are people who are more talented to deal with crisis. Of course, I know a lot of women who are able to juggle many balls at the same time. And that, of course, comes handy during crisis situations. But I think some men are able to do that too. I think it's actually not a competition in that sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriella. Very, very interesting answers, all of you. We're going to talk right now about the importance of gender equality. Gender equality has been underlined by the international community in the UN Sustainable Development Goals through the adoption of SDG 5. Athena, I would like to know, what is your position on gender equality and standardization?
Well, within our organization, a few years ago, back in 2015, actually, we took this initiative of implementing sound industrial relations policies through through a process that was implemented by the Industrialist Federation here. It wasn't compulsory, but we thought that just by the title of it, Sound Industrial Relations, means that you're tackling things like gender equality and other forms of equality. So we implemented a lot of policies that had to do with bringing everyone at the same level. Having said that, of course, I started at the organization back in 2004 in the certification unit of the organization. And at the time, I was the only woman, minus the administration staff, who by definition, maybe at the time when you were looking for a secretary, if I may use this word, or for administration and supporting personnel, you were always talking using the female gender, which is not now the case. So when I was starting back in 2004 in certification, everyone was saying that, oh, you know, it will always be an environment where men would be the auditors and men would be prevailing there. And it was true. I was working with men colleagues of the same age as me, but I had to behave differently. I had to try harder, because being a woman under 30, I wasn't taken seriously, maybe not the same as the men. That was 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, and a lot of things have changed. So we are now, both in standardization and certification, we're now equal men and women in terms of numbers and in terms of academic background as well. We have been promoting gender equality through standards in Cyprus, and 2 years ago, the Ministry of Labor, after being introduced to the world of standardization and what this means, they have given us a mandate, and we have started developing a standard for gender equality at the workplace. And at the time, we were surprised when we looked at the European and international database of standards to not find anything international or even a European standard, not a national for any other country, not even a European standard dealing with gender equality. It's been a slow process because there's a lot of issues that you need to consider, but we're working towards slowly developing the standard, and we have found recognition by the competent authority, the Ministry of Labor, saying that once the standard is developed, it can be a certifiable standard, so as to be able to give some sort of award, either monetary or in any other form, to organizations that will be certified against this standard. So we are hoping that what we've started at a national level and what we preach and practice within our organization will gradually get more international recognition. And we've also signed the Gender Equality Declaration of the United States last year, I think.
Perfect. That sounds very impressive, and I wish you really good luck. It sounds fantastic. And now we'll go to IEC. Gabriela, what's your position on gender equality and standardization?
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's interesting to see that a lot of experts in standardization feel that technical standards are neutral. But what one keeps forgetting is that data often is neutral. It is assembled from studies that are most of the time done with men, and not necessarily because women were not thought about, but because in certain studies it would have been too dangerous, for example, if a woman was pregnant. And then out of that, of course, the results in these studies and data is a little bit biased, which means that oftentimes when I hear, for example, how electricity travels through the body, when you talk with experts, they say, well, it's exactly the same. But you know that women's skins are thinner, they're more humid, their body composition is different. So there's naturally a much different impact, for example, if you have an electric shock. And it's only when you talk to these experts and give them examples that they realize that there is a built-in bias and we will have to do something about it. It's also useful to have more women in the standardization process, albeit I don't think that, especially when there's not women represented in the standardization process, that we can expect that they will speak up for all women. There is a whole education process that has to be happening with the experts themselves. We can't expect the women who are participating to take over that role.
Thank you, Gabriela. Very, very interesting and inspiring as well. And Dalia, can you tell us about how you handle the issue of gender equality in Israel?
Yes, I have to admit, Vered, as you probably know, that I was quite blind to this part of gender equality in standardization. I thought that the Israeli standardization process is equal, we don't have a problem. And last October, our CEO, Dr. Gilad Golob, signed the UNEC Gender Equality Declaration, and we started to having a plan in order to implement this declaration, and I was shocked. We figure out that our committees, they have only less than 20% women presented as committee members. We are looking into our standards in order to find out if they take into consideration the differences between women and men. And I have to say that we have problems and we have a long way to go. But the good thing is that we have a plan. And since you have a plan, then you have the opportunity to change it, because especially the members of our committees is something that we can change. Really, there are more than 50% women that graduated in Israel that has academic degrees, and having only less than 20% them in our committees is really something that we have to change. So yes, it's good that we had this problem on table, and I really believe that if we will have the same conversation in 2 or 3 years, we can have other numbers.
Okay, I wrote it down. 2 years. Let's try.
3. Give me 3.
3 years, that's okay. Thank you, Dalia. I'm really curious to know what's happening in South Africa Bureau of Standard. Jody, can you tell us?
So gender equality and standardization is a personal focus for myself, as well as for the SABS as a national standards body. One of the things we've realized is we only have 24% women representation in our technical committee. So we've set some targets for the new financial year in terms of participation in technical and in the subcommittees, as well as for chairpersons of these technical committees. We've also been able to realize that by bringing women into our standards development process, it's been pivotal in changing how the standards are developed. So for instance, in general protective workwear, things like maternity sizes were into consideration before, and suddenly when you have women's voices in the technical committee, you then understand that the standard isn't catering for women in the workforce, and you just look at the number of women in across a range of sectors, and so it's absolutely critical that we need to bring more women, and especially young women and youth, into these technical committees, so that we start growing our own trees and have this transfer of skill, so that we're building the building blocks in terms of education and experience and exposure for young people is absolutely pivotal to keeping standards relevant and alive. And so we've also been looking at all of our national standards from a gendered lens and realizing that these also need changes. So there's a work program that we've put in place to make sure then that our standards are looked at from a gendered, with a gendered lens. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jody. Next time, just speak a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you louder, but thank you very much. I would like to turn to Elizabeth. What is your personal contribution to standardization? I know you for many, many years, and I know about your contribution, and I think everybody should know. And what would you recommend for women who are starting to work in standardization these days?
Well, let me start with the second question, what I would recommend to women who start in standardization. Actually, there could be a role in the standardization work itself. And here I can only really invite women to come to the table, or virtual table of standardization, so that they can contribute. I think that standardization is very much underestimated as a chance for a career as well, because you learn a lot when you participate in standardization. Of course, this goes for men and women, but we are also, of course, looking at the secret adoption standards, and we see that it has improved a lot with the generation. We have about 5% women in the age group 60 plus, but 25, not so much, but at least 25 in the age group below 30. So I would tell them, be interested in standardization, use this instrument, use this experience to learn and to shape the world, if I may say so. As to your first question, what I might have been my personal contribution, well, maybe it's quite well reflected by my background. It was always important for me to connect people and to connect organizations. When I was ISO Vice President, it was high on my agenda to have a good relationship with IEC, with ITU, but also with the ecosystem of standardizing entities that do not have that kind of data. I think reaching out and connecting in this ecosystem of standardization, this is key, and I always try to contribute to making this network better.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You inspire all of us. I would like now to turn to Andrea, which I also know for many, many years, and I know about her personal contribution. Please tell us, what is your contribution, and what would you recommend for women who are newcomers to the business?
Thank you, Vered. Well, I think I'm the only person here who doesn't work for a national standards body.
That's right.
I'm a standards user. I've worked in the construction industry all my life, and I've used standards as a source of information. Around about 1996, I joined a company called Arab, and there I was given the role of being standards manager. And my boss at the time suggested that I join the British Standards Society. She said it would be very useful, and I'd learn an awful lot about standards and standardization that I would find useful for my job. So I did that, and she was right. I did. It was a very, very useful place to be. And gradually over the years, I moved from just being a member of British Standards Society to being chair of the Building Standards Group and then chair of the society itself. And I think one of the things I've done is really try to open the eyes of my standards body in the UK, BSI, to the value of having users involved in standardization. One of the things I did back in the early days on a number of occasions was speak to staff at BSI about what a standard user was, because there was always this confusion with consumers. People thought that a user was a consumer, but of course a user isn't. A user uses the standard, not the end product of the standard. And so I did quite a lot of talking to get that information across. And I'm glad to say that today we are consulted very often by BSI. We sit on a lot of, we have members sitting on a lot of technical committees, and the user's contribution is requested often by standards chairman. So I think that's a bit of an achievement. And along the way, I joined IFAN and became a member of the IFAN board. And within IFAN, one of my roles as well as secretary is chair of the IFAN European Group. And one of the things that we are very pleased we got involved with in the IFAN European Group is a guide for writing user-friendly standards for users by European technical committees. That document was taken on board by SEN's SME group, and became SENS Guide 17, which of course is now ISO Guide 17. And it's very nice to see that that guide for SMEs has taken a lot of the information from writing user-friendly guides standards. So again, I'm very pleased with that. And as to what I would say to women, I would say that the standardization world is actually brilliant to be involved in. We are a real community. It's a very friendly place. People help each other. And I think for anybody, I would recommend it as a place to work, whether you work within a standards organization or a standards users group. Get involved.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think we should all thank you for being the voice of the users for so many years. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Annika, you came to the standardization world from the industry. You are you held managerial positions in Ericsson as well as SAP. And now that you're in standardization, I'm curious to know what is your personal contribution and what would you suggest for the women who are now getting into the new industry?
Yeah, I worked with standardization at Ericsson, so I was on the other side. I would say I was an expert. So I think I got. I really loved the standardization from the beginning. It's, as Andrea said, it's about getting knowledge, building knowledge. It's a fantastic way of getting networks and building relationships with both your competitors and other skilled experts. So it's a wonderful world in that way, and the borders between you really is not there in the standardization room. So that's fantastic. What I would like to contribute with is showing the world of standardization, being visible, and actually describe the fantastic system it is, both for being a tool for harmonization, trade, innovation, building knowledge, but also then gender equality. It's really standards is an important tool for gender equality, and I just want to highlight that today SAS together with ISO and ITC, the International Trade Center, marks the publication of the ISO International Workshop Agreement for Women's Entrepreneurship. It's the first EVA for women's entrepreneurship, and it has been developed digitally completely. So there you can actually see how you can attract a lot of people. We have had over 300 international experts from over 60 countries developing this EVA they started in July last year and are ready now. So I just want to highlight that. It's an event this afternoon with the managing director of ISO, Sergio Mujica, participating.
Thank you very much. Very, very inspiring. I would like you all the speakers, to take a moment and let's be futurists. Let's think. What will standardization world look like the day after COVID? How will we work in the future in the post-pandemic era? You may refer to standardization work as well as to your office work. I will ask this question to all my panelists. Annika, I would like to start with you.
Oh, no, I'm unmuted, I hope. Yes, I believe that, as I said, we have reduced thresholds. We are more inclusive now, I would say, than before. I hope we can attract SMEs, developing countries, more participants in the standardization to actually increase the quality and make better standards. But as I said also before, I think we need to build the relationships. That's really what is a foundation for developing standards, is the relationship between the experts and the peoples. So we need to find this combination of meeting, but still in between, having progress in this digital format as we are meeting now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, what will our standardization world look like the day after COVID?
I think we have a bigger choice. We have one more way of working, one more channel of communication that is normal and popular, it's a digital meeting. But I violently agree with Annika that building personal relationships is also important. So how to balance that? That will be a challenge. And I think nobody really likes hybrid meetings, but we are going to have to train on how to do them, because it will be our daily reality. On the one hand, to still allow for home office, but also to allow people both to meet and but also to be part digitally. And as to the standardization system, is I think the national delegation principle, which I think is very important, but we will have to consider also how it will evolve when we meet so easily here in groups digitally. So, as I said, a bigger choice, but a careful choice to make.
Thanks. Very interesting. Jody, we would like to turn to you.
Thanks. So I think, agreeing with the fellow panelists, that we'd have to have some kind of hybrid model where you would do some remote working, but we're all social creatures, and so creating spaces for human interaction and engagement is going to be critical in the area of work. I think also the hybrid model also allows for, well, we've certainly seen it in our case, the quieter technical committee members are also now giving their inputs in written format, whereas a few voices may dominate the room previously. I think also with the awareness campaign that we've undertaken, we'd like to see more enhanced participation of women in the standards and standards development process. And then I think one of the things we'd like to keep on is obviously the hybrid nature of both personal meetings and online has resulted in lowering the costs for standardization and the development of standards. I think there are lots of positives about this. So looking maybe at shorter meetings, smaller working groups, I think those are some of the key benefits that we look forward to in a world that's post-COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, Jody. Now I heard you very well. Thank you. Athena, I turn to you now to be the futurist.
Well, the futurist, I will take on the hybrid meetings as well and say that we believe that, even though I said before the remote meetings have gone out of this world in terms of numbers, I think the hybrid meetings will enable more people to be involved in standardization, because restrictions like budget, like traveling time and traveling distance can be eliminated. I also think that upon this pandemic ending, we will not rest, and we will be preparing for what might the future hold in terms of standards relating to medical equipment in the medical field. I think we will see more efforts to being able to do standards for climate change, all things related to any future pandemics. Work-wise, for us, yes, we will keep some form of remote working from home. I think we should also consider things like, when returning to the normal, if that's possible, to consider psychological factors as well. We have a new standard now, health and safety at the workplace, on a draft standard, but the psychological sector. And I think we should pay big attention to that, because not only the people coming back to the office will have to find the way to get back to the normal, but we would all have to find the way to overcome any psychological aspects from being away from each other so long, from not having physical meetings. You will no longer be able to give your hand for a handshake that easily when you meet someone new. You will always have at the back of your mind that maybe you should be more careful. And I think this in general will affect the whole work environment. So I think we should work towards that as well, not just the standards as such, but taking care of our people as well, and the way they will come back to the new normal.
Thank you. I think you're right. We discussed it last week when we spoke, both of us, about the psychological effects, especially for children and adults. And we also I spoke to you and with Andrea, who will be next, about cats and children running in front of the computer when we have all those Zoom calls. So Andrea, I would like to hear what you have to say, and talk about your cat who's running in front of the screen.
Thank you, Berit. I think for BSS, actually, the pandemic has been very good. We are an organisation of users, as I've said before. We're based, people are all over the UK, and we actually have some members overseas as well. But we hold our meetings, physical meetings, in London. And this, of course, has meant that a lot of people couldn't attend our meetings. Some were hybrid, but some, like our annual meeting and our conferences, were very much in-person meetings, but we've had to go online. And we've had a huge increase in the number of people participating, which has been really good. And we started 2 new special interest groups this year, just because of the numbers that were able to participate at their areas of interest and the locations, some companies being well outside of London. So it's been really good. I think as well for technical committees, I sit on 2 BSI technical committees. And on one of my committees, we'd already decided that we would have a lot of virtual meetings as well as some face-to-face meetings, really to reduce the environmental footprint of our committee. And I think that paid off in that we were already very used to having virtual meetings, and we're going to continue with that. But as many people have mentioned, of course, one of the most valuable things to us as individuals participating in technical committees is the opportunity to network with our colleagues in other organisations and to actually get to feel like a team. And of course, with the best will in the world, it's very hard to do in a virtual environment. So I hope that we will probably keep having at least one big BSS meeting a year, but have many more smaller online meetings where we can increase our participation. So I think really, and of course, Vered mentioned my cats who have in time, of course, jumped in front of me. Luckily, the door is shut today and there should be no interruptions by cats, but it has happened. And of course, the chickens occasionally join us at the back door as well. So it's quite fun. Thanks, Vered.
Thank you, Andrea. I think it makes life more interesting this way. And the next one who will be the futurist is Dalia. I just realized that I work with Dalia in the same office, but this year I think I saw her on Zoom much more than I saw her in person. And we also had lots of meetings with kids going on around. So I turn to you to be the futurist. What will the day after COVID look like?
Well, I don't think I'm a futurist, but I'm looking at this point on a realistic point of view. Yes, I agree with all the former speakers. Meetings are going to be hybrids. Some of them are going to be virtual, some of them face-to-face. There is not replace to a face-to-face meetings. We need the connection. This is the basic of a standardization. So once in a while, we will have to meet face-to-face. The same goes to our working place. We will work a few days from office like we are doing now at the SII, few days from office, few days from home, and I believe this will be our future. But I would like to refer to what Athena mentioned. I agree that the topics, the items of standardization will also increase because this crisis, the pandemic crisis, bring into the table some new topics that the standardization world will have to deal with. It's not only those medical devices that are obvious and managing hospitals, but also those psychological aspects that Athena mentioned will be very important, and I believe that they will be the future items for standardization.
Thank you very much, Dalia. Gabriela, it's your turn. What will the IC look like a day after COVID?
Well, you put me in a difficult position being last. I can't even talk about my cats anymore.
No, you can talk about your cats. It's perfect.
I think that, like a lot of people around the table here already said, in standardization, you need to have face-to-face meetings, interactions, especially for consensus building and conflict resolutions. I see that a lot of the CFOs in companies have probably been very happy with the reduction in the travel budgets. And I could imagine that some experts will have quite a hard time to be able to travel again, because this is a fixed cost position. It's a cost position that has been significantly reduced over the last year. I think another aspect is that we've been getting so used to working at home. I remember talking at the beginning of the pandemic with people who said like, oh, no, my people have to come back to the office right away as soon as they can. And it seems to me that the whole digitization has made an incredible jump forward. But of course, with that comes also a need to balancing how you manage hybrid teams. How are they going to cooperate? How you keep people together as teams. And in another thing I saw that was very appreciative, and I think will be going forward, is sort of a flattening of a hierarchy. I think Elizabeth pointed a bit to that, but it has also to do with the fact that a lot of times when you were in meetings and you could only listen, you can now comment in chats, and you can actually influence the decision process and the thought process a bit behind the scene, which is very interesting. You get many more voices. You get people who don't speak up to actually share their thoughts through chats, and you also have a way of keeping trace of that. So yeah, overall, I think we will look at a very different world, but we are animals. We have to have contact. I don't think, like Annika said, we can consume our capital of social interaction. All of us who have had contact with others who are sitting here, we feel the person who is virtual. But people who have not had contact, it's a whole dimension that's missing.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this fascinating webinar. I'm sure you're going to inspire women from around the world with your insights in this complex time. I wish you lots of success in promoting standards for the benefit of our economies. I hope this will be the first in a series of webinars about the role of women in standardization. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.